So, you've thought that your M4 doesn't have enough damage, so you decide to take the SCAR H because apparently it can one-shot someone to the torso. Unfortunately, you still don't know how to build your guns properly, and as such you make another one of these guns like this. First off, thank you for coming. My views have been horrible recently, and second of all, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a good SCAR H build. I've already done one of these videos on the M4, and that was pretty comprehensive, but we'll go with the SCAR H. Now, why did I choose the SCAR H when I could have chosen the SA58 or the G3? They're all 308s and they're all capable of killing someone in one shot to the torso with the default stats. Well, the main reason is because the SCAR H is the most modular. It's effectively the M4 of the 308s. And secondly, it's also considered the best 308 by most of the people that I know who have used all 308s. So yeah, let's get into it. Cue the intro. If you watched my previous M4 video, you will know that there are certain categories of guns that you could build your SCAR M4 to be. However, with the SCAR H, it's a bit different because of the certain characteristics. The SCAR H generally has worse handling than the M4, obviously, higher damage, but also way worse recoil because of the bigger caliber. So SBRs really are not viable. For this gun, there's really 4 kinds of builds again, however they're different. We have the GPR from last time, which is basically an all-purpose rifle. We have the SPR from last time, which is basically a rifle that is meant for longer ranges but not quite sniper ranges. We have our DMR, which can actually be called the DMR this time because it has the range and the caliber to do so. It's a designated marksman rifle. And then finally, we have the full-on semi-auto sniper rifle, I'll call it, or semi-auto sniper system, the SASS. This thing is mostly for extremely long ranges, and you're going to be completely useless up close with it. Now that that's over with, let's get on to our first build, the GPR. Alright, so this is our first SCAR build. We're going to be doing a GPR. Starting with our grip, we're going to be using any of these is fine actually. All of them are good options as long as it's not the Hera Arm CQR or whatever this thing is. Personally, I would use either the K2 modified or the BCM gunfighter. For the lower, the SCAR standard is actually pretty good. You can get some high ergo out of it if you build it properly. That means putting on all these stuff. However, you can get higher ergo with the Lingle Industries AR-17 SCAR H lower. Here's an example. Here, we can get up to, let's see, 50 ergo with this. Versus with this thing, it's only 41. However, it doesn't really matter. The thing is still pretty good as is. 43. Still pretty good as is. And I prefer it, the look actually. For the upper, it's really the SCAR H standard or the Imperial Arm Cypher X standard. Both are good. There's not much modularity when it comes to this. For the gas block, anything is fine. It really depends on what you're going for. Now, for handguards though, that's a whole different story. It depends on your barrel. If you're going to be using the 330mm barrel, then something like the Mad Bull PWS would be good. Or the Laylax, though I don't use the Laylax on this thing. But on the other hand, it's also good if you're using the 406mm. Some good options would be the Midwest Industries SOCOM, the Scar Quad Rail, or one of these kinetic developments. They're all pretty good, but I'd recommend the Midwest Industries Quad Rail. Looks the best, and in my opinion, performs the best as well. So we're gonna keep that on for now. As for barrel, as I said, use either the 16-inch or the 406 if you want a longer barrel, or for the shorter barrel, you can use the 330mm. For bolt, do not change it to the Imperial Arms. It's not worth the recoil. For magazine, stick with the NATO. The Molon Lab isn't really worth it as much unless you want 15. Unless you trust yourself with 15 rounds, then you can use the Molon Lab 15 rounder. However, it's not really worth it, and forget about using whatever this is. Then, for a stock, you can use either the default Scar stock, the kinetic development. Any of these stocks is fine. The Haga defense is also good, but I don't like it. Or the Mesa Tactical. Just keep in mind that the Mesa Tactical is extremely heavy, and it's not, and you'll get the same stats or even worse if you didn't have it in the first place. Plus, it just looks ugly on the Scar H. It looks okay on the Scar L. In my opinion, stick with the default or the kinetic development. They're both good. Okay, stay with this for now. As for rear sights and front sights, it depends on which mount you choose. If you're going to use this kinetic development, you should use the M-Bus iron sights. However, if you're going to stick with the defaults, just fold them down. They're already good enough as is. For a gas selector, always use the Scarburator. Scarburator is always the best option. For a charging handle, it's up to you. It doesn't affect performance that much or in a noticeable way, so it's ultimately up to looks. Then with our Picatinny for GPRs, when it comes to 7.62s, you don't really need magnification as much since you're going to be one-tapping them anyways. So any EOTech will be fine, or even any of the small dots, so like the Romeo 3 or the micros like this thing. However, I do not use them because it just looks weird usually. However, if you do want magnification, well, your options are either using an EOTech with a mount. Let's just put on a mount here. Just never mind the position, which is just for demonstration. Yeah, really it's just use EOTech magnifier combo, or you could use an Elcan. This is my personal favorite combo. It's good with the Mark 17 build. Or you could use, say, something like the NC Star Mark 3 Tactical. It's a bit high magnification, but if you lower the magnification, it works pretty well at short ranges. Or, and this is a big or because it doesn't really work as well, you can use one of the ACOG, so TA51s. And then personally from experience, I would recommend using the TA11 because it looks the best and it just works the best on the Scar H. However, you can't go wrong with the TA01. I used to use the TA01, the old version, and it wasn't bad. We'll stick with the TA11. As for our muzzle, the new Odin works are pretty good. You can use them. However, in my opinion, remove the compensator if you want to have an enjoyable game, because keeping that thing on causes suffering. Or you could just use a SIG SRD 762, which was my go-to back in the day. Or use a muzzle brake. However, that lowers the damage, so unless you're confident enough, don't use it. With the J-Comp, the Oppressor Blast regulator already exists, so that's a mandatory put on there. As I said for our grip, the BCM. For Picatinny, now here we don't really need many extra attachments. However, it's good to have them. So on the bottom, I'd recommend a vertical grip or a angled foregrip. I prefer vertical grips because of the horizontal recoil reduction, and my picks are the Daniel Defense Soft Touch rubber, the CAC VPG, and the big version of the BCM Gunfighter Mod 3. These all work pretty well. The RVG is pretty good, it's also balanced, it's somewhere in between the AFG and the VPG. So do what you will with that. I'd also predict that the UTG MSQD and the UTG Super Slim Vertical are good grips as well. But we're gonna go with RVG for this one. As for our other things like lasers, the new EOTech OGL is a great idea. It's pretty good. The green laser is one of my favorites in terms of color, and it just looks like a better PEC 15. However, you can't go wrong with said PEC 15. Just don't buy the PEC 16 under any circumstances. It may have a flashlight, but it's so big that you can't see half your reticle on some guns. So it's a huge waste of cash. Yeah, we'll stick with our OGL. And on the side, I'd advise a flashlight with this thing because the Scar H works best at night conditions, surprisingly. So take this and use the long one, the long light. I found it works better than the short light. It's more consistent. I'm not sure if that's just a placebo again, however, it's pretty good. Considering I haven't bought it, that probably means that I was using a different light. It's probably a WMX 200. Yeah, the WMX 200 and the Last Stack 2 are also good options. For more low profile, use the Last Stack, and for looks, use the WMX. It's much weaker than the Last Stack somehow, but it's still good. And that rounds out our GPR. The ergo isn't the best, but it's a battle rifle. What do you expect? If you really want to increase ergo, just use this stock. And yeah, that's about it. Using this build, you will see that it doesn't have the best handling. It has the exact same handling as when you started, and that's probably because of the sight and the handguard we are using. You can get higher stats. However, for a battle rifle, this is pretty serviceable if not good. So see, recoil isn't as bad. Not that it's good, it's still not that preferable. However, it's certainly better than before. Add to that, your stamina is pretty low now because you lose stamina for shooting things. And this is a pretty good ergo build because it doesn't make you lose much stamina. I forgot to mention about ammo. With the Scar H, you might be tempted to use Fed American Eagle, however it's not that good. I've tried it before in the gun editor and it's very inconsistent due to less damage range and that kind of thing. So if you're willing to sacrifice some accuracy, use MAT ball. However, if you want more consistent shots, like less bullet drop over range, use M62. I've found that works a lot on DMR builds. And yeah, that's about it for the GPR. Alright, let's move on to SPRs. In this case, they're pretty similar to the GPRs due to the fact that this is a battle rifle. Your barrel choice will still be one of the 16 inches, but more emphasis on the 16 inches now. When it comes to side rails, they're not really as needed as much since it's better to use a handguard. In this case, we'll use the Midwest Industries Scar SOCOM M-Lock this time. As for our lower receiver, use the Lingle Industries AR-17 or the FN Scar Standard. With the SPRs, it's not really optimal to use the X products, so let's use the Lingle. For the trigger, it's actually the same as with the M4. However, here, better to use the Timney drop-in. The Rice Armaments is also good, but only if you're really going for ergo. Prefer the Timney drop-in for this case. With the mag, always use the translucents. There is no point in using these solid opaque mags or the drums. If you really want 30 rounds, use the translucent. I prefer 20. I can trust myself. With the fire selector, use the kinetic development, of course. With the upper receiver, you could go with the FN Scar Mark 20, and I'll show you a combo that you can use. You can do the Scar Mark 20 with the 406mm like this. Oh wait, not 5.8, 406. And this is also a good handguard and barrel setup. However, If you want more ergo, stick to one of the other rails plus a handguard of sorts. So in this case, we're going to be using the Midwest. For the gas block, if you don't care about looks, use the Scar Mark 20. However, if you do like having some kind of iron sight, use the High Desert Dog in this case. And for front sight base today, we're going to be using an M-bus combo. So we have one M-bus here and another M-bus there. Always make sure to change it to the front and the rear sight respectively. Alright, and for our stock, it's pretty much the same except for the fact that now we can scratch the Mesa Tactical off and we can instead put on the FN Scar SSR. But I would still prefer the default or the kinetic in this case because they're more versatile. This one, the Scar SSR makes your recoil horrible, although it improves your ergo, but it's not really worth the recoil reduction, even from a standpoint of someone who doesn't really go for stats. Then, when it comes to your grip, it's the same. Anything but the TD skeletonized or the hair arm CQR. In this case, I will be using the HK Battle. For our M-Lock, it really depends on your preference. You could either go with an 11 slot M-Lock and then you could use some kind of hand stop like the Magpul XTM full hand stop. This is a good attachment for most guns. Or you could go with the regular vertical grip combo or even an angle grip. Though if you're going to use an angle grip, just use the Aeronox AX M-Lock grip, the BCM Gunfighter CAG, or the cut versions or shortened versions of the BCM Gunfighter Mod 3. The Magpul M-Lock AFG is also a good option. However, at that point, I'd rather use the Aeronox AX M-Lock grip. So that's what we're gonna use. And think about it, let's change this to an MOAK2. Then for our charging handle, same. Doesn't really matter. For gas selector, always use, as I said, the carburetor. For threading with the SPR, there's more leeway with the suppressors. You could use the Osprey. This is pretty weird and it's more of a futuristic vibe. However, the medium size Odin Works is also good. Just remember to remove the compensator, or you could just go with something like the muzzle brakes and then put on their blast regulators. The Warden is also a good one. This works pretty well. And see the ergo and weight is pretty similar. And then finally, when it comes to sights, here you can still use something like an unmagnified sight like the EOTEX. However, it's more preferred to have magnified now, so Elcan is still the first choice. However, if you really want to go for the SPR, like with the suppressor and the such, you can start moving up to LPVO, so we can take our Badger Ordnance 30mm. With SPRs here, it's not necessary to have a super high powered scope, so Badger Ordnance like this will work pretty well. However, you could also use the NC Star Mark III. I haven't used it here, however, I've tried it in the gun editor and it's pretty good. Or you could just use an ACOG again. However, that would be the same as the GPR. Come to think of it, this is not that different from a GPR. It's just that you're going to use it for a different role and you might have to make a little modifications to your GPR to make it better. So any magnified sight will be fine, really. So in this case, we'll just use NC Star. And for Picatinny, you'll probably want to use a smaller laser so you have a larger sight picture. So we're going to use a Hollow Sun. I would use the sight mark, but that's way too small. On the other hand, on second thought, let's just use the sight mark for now. Let's take our low pro combo or the low pro mini combo here. Yeah, that works. And then for lights, if you're using the sight mark, there's no need, but have a light. Use the Arisaka, of course. And yeah, that's about it. Just put on your mag assist if you're going to be using the lingual lower. See, now we have much more magnification. In my opinion, just use somewhere in between the largest and the least, because the largest is highest magnification is too strong. However, lowest magnification is decent. So take this. With this kind of setup, you will need to learn how to use the shift function of holding your breath. When you get to the highest point, that's when you should probably shoot, because that's the apex of your breath. Like here. Exactly then. And height over bore is also a problem with the Scar H. Not that bad though. As said before, just use M80 or M62. Do not bother with CBC or FedAm. And yeah, that's about it for the SPR. Not the best looking, but yeah, it works. Alright, so this is our DMR build section. The purpose of the DMR build is to bridge the gap between a full-on SASS, a semi-auto sniper system, and an SPR, a special purpose rifle. Usually special purpose rifles will be in 7.62, but I've given that name to something like to the previous build so that it symbolizes the build that bridges the gap between the GPR and the DMR, which is a line that is starting to be blurred even in video games. We can see that there are people with 3 times extending out to very long ranges. But for this build, we're going to be going with a DMR, as I said. So, our stock, here there are really, once again, 3 choices. There's the Scar SSR, the FN Scar, or the Kinetic Development. If you're going to go for a more passive DMR, it's better to use the Scar SSR. However, if you're the kind of person who likes offensive setups, then the Kinetic Development or the Standard will be a better pick for you. For upper, it's either you use the Imperial Arms or the Scar H with the handguard. It most preferably the longer Kinetic Developments or the Midwest Industries Scar Quad Rail, not the Unlock Rail. Or you could use the Mark 20 upper, which is what we're going to try and do today. As for the lower doesn't really matter. For today, we're going to be using the X Products X17 because the lingo is just too boring, I'll say. And then we can put on these side rails. The side rails are optional, but the bottom rail is a must. It helps with shooting and ergo and attachments quite a bit more. Then we have our barrel length. We can either go with the 16-inch barrel that has a 2-inch extension to make an 18-inch barrel, which is a good pick if you don't really want to sacrifice your weight as much. Not that you're going to be saving much weight anyways, and then you can put a can on it. Or you could go all the way and you could use a 20-inch with a can on it. That's also a good choice, and it is the basis for the build that I used to get 48 kills and 3 deaths one time. For this one, we're going to be using the Kinetic Development. Our magazine, we generally want to be able to be effective at closer ranges, so we're going to use the Lancer systems. When it comes to our trigger and other stuff, let's just use our ergo attachments. Remember the drill. For this one, you're gonna want higher ergo, so go with the MOE K2, or you could go with the BCM Gunfighter. The BCM Gunfighter is the best choice in my opinion. The Aeronox, the difference is too big with recoil, and recoil is not a static line like where 1 is the same. 1 from 40 to 41 is the same as 50 to 51. There's a huge difference between 40 to 41 recoil, and there's a huge difference between having 50 and 51 recoil. As usual, Mototech Engineering's carburetor. For Picatinny, you're going to want to go with angled grips. Don't go with grip pods. They don't really do well in my opinion, and they're not really worth their benefits. So go with something like an AFG-2 or a Fortis Shift. I mean, the Fortis Shift is Tarkov setup, but who cares? Like, if you're really going for looks, just start going like this. Or the Stark SE5 is kind of cursed, but it does work well in some builds. But you can't go wrong with the AFG-2 or the BCM Gunfighter Mod 3 Picatinny, whether it be the shortened or this. Doesn't really matter. I have never tried the shortened, but based on my experience with the shortened, it will be performing well. For now, we're just going to be using an AFG. Kind of boring, but yeah. For a charging handle, once again, what you like, because it doesn't make much of a difference. And for Picatinny, you have basically three options. You could go with an LPVO, something like this, and then you put on a red dot to the side or on top as a piggyback. This is a good combo, and this is also a setup that generally yields good results, as this is basically the one I used in my 48-3 kill game. Anyway, or you could use a higher magnification optic like the NC Star again. Whereas the NC Star Mark III Tactical, though not as good, and it's kind of weird how it magnifies itself. This is a good option, and it looks just fine. It's very subjective, this sight, in my opinion. Or we could go with the full-on rifle scope, so let's take our Badger Ordnance 34. Or we could use this. This is a full power rifle scope. You will, if you are playing on a high sensitivity, you will need to adjust it, make your mouse low sensitivity and increase the sensitivity, scope sensitivity even higher, because with high magnification scopes you will find yourself snapping a lot. I've experienced it myself, but generally when it comes to scopes, it's those three. There are other new options like the Saturn, the Cosmic Tactical Saturn, this futuristic looking ACOG. I find that it feels like it has more magnification than an actual ACOG itself, so it's also a good pick. It feels like a 6 times when in reality it's probably a 4 times or something. We'll take our RM33 and we'll just try it on how it looks, and not bad. But for now we're going to stick with our LPVO. Then for other pieces of furniture that you're gonna want to put on your gun, you should definitely have a laser on this thing, because at closer ranges in some places a laser will help, so that you don't even need to use your red dot to kill someone. That saved me a lot of times, so I'd recommend the PEC 15 for this job. An OGL will also work, but in this case PEC 15 is more reliable, and I've found that people don't see red lasers as much as green lasers. For flashlights, it's purely optional. If you're okay with taking the hit to our already god-awful weight, go with a flashlight of any kind. It doesn't really matter. And then, that's about it. But if you really want to make this into a hybrid role, like a GP DMR, General Purpose Designated Marksman Rifle, that's a mouthful, just lower the barrel length. That's enough to make this into a more versatile gun. However, if you really want to hit your shots from longer range, go with the 20-inch. It always works. And as usual, mag assist. For this gun, you're really not gonna want to use something like it's not necessary, because this thing already has extremely low dispersion. A laser will save your life. See here. Something like that. However, you find that this thing doesn't have the best recoil. It seems to have worse recoil than our GPR. However, it's pretty good for long range shots. Let's take this guy over to the sniper range to see how it works. We are now at the sniper range, and I will show you how this works. See, I'm still snapping a bit. 1. Very little bullet drop and very little dispersion even at this range. I find that it's actually hitting exactly where my dot is at this range. Must have been the height overbore stabilizing. Pretty good. That's the advantage of having the 20-inch barrel. Less dispersion over range, so you can be more sure of where your shots are hitting. However, it requires you to change your sensitivity. For some people, it might be better, but most of the time, I found that people don't like it when they change their sensitivities. And also, keep an eye on your stamina, because that's also a big factor to whether you'll be able to shoot or miss your shots. That's it for our DMR build. On to our final build, the SASS. Alright, so we're on our final build, the SASS system. For this one, I recommend you stick with the SCAR 8 standard because you're really going to be staying at long ranges, so you don't need large mag capacities. For this one, I recommend stay with the NATO 10 round, or even if you want the Mullen late 10 round. Or again, if you don't trust yourself, the 15 rounder is also fine, but for this case, I'm going to be using the 10 round. Take your ergo attachments. You're gonna want to have a lot of ergo. So we'll take these. Yeah. Then for grip, you're gonna want ergo as well. So go with the PMM SCAR modified, the BCM Gunfighter Mod 3, or the MOA K2 modified. I prefer the BCM Gunfighter. For a stock piece, the FN SCAR or the FN SCAR SSR. Do not go with the kinetic development. For our upper receiver, you're gonna want to go once again with a one of the regular ones with a handguard extension, or you could go with the Mark 20 upper receiver. For a gas block, we're going to use the Mark 20. The High Desert Dog is the best one for the default receivers, I'll say. We'll take our rails. You don't really need iron sights with this thing unless you really want to max out that ergo. For our barrel, we're going to be using the Deadshot 20-inch. And if you're crazy enough, you could put on a barrel extension, but I feel that's unnecessary considering the damage is already that high. So stay with this or the FN SCAR 508mm Mark 20. Both of them are good. However, I've found that this one has higher ergo, better recoil, and is more accurate. For ammo, you really don't need to change it. Just use M80. The medium suppressor, Odin Works suppressor already exists. If you really want that grouping, just remove that. That's all you need to do. Or even just use the SIG SRD 762 for that 100%. You are sure that is not going to change. See, look at this. Stat slider doesn't change. That's 0 MOA. Yeah. Then we'll take our foregrip. With this, it doesn't really matter. Just use an angled foregrip or a short vertical foregrip of any kind. So the RVG, AFG, that kind of thing is going to work. If you're going with a bipod combo, just wait till the bipods, if they ever do come out or ever exist, yeah, just wait for them to come out because there's no point in bringing along Mr. Grip Pod over here. And then for your scopes, you're gonna want the highest magnification, and since you're not going to be using this at close range, just use the KHF IEA. This thing is pretty good. Or you could go with the NC Star again, but the NC Star is just tiny, so I'd prefer if you just used probably one of these the Night Force ATACR scopes. And if you really want a last resort, just take your RMR sight on there. I mean, you're definitely not gonna use it, but hey, it's there, you can use it. And if you really want a laser, put it on a canted nut. So just take the RMR AC3 2066. You're going to want this because otherwise it's going to block your sight view when you're in scope with the scope. So on that, we're going to put on an RM33 and on that an RMR. Yeah, or as I said, you could put on laser, this cursed, because there's already a RMR piggyback. So we're going to put a laser. In this case, I'd probably go with the OGL. See, it still blocks, but it's not like some kind of Eldritch hellscape where half your sight picture is just gone. In my opinion, just don't run with it. Kills your ergo and it's not really helpful. So just take that. And yeah, most of the true SASS builds are going to look like this. However, well, it's the best way to build a SASS. Since your damage is not going to be a problem and neither is dispersion, you should probably be using M62 because it loses less velocity. It may be only 10% less, but you can feel the difference. Here's its performance at short range. Really doesn't work. I see, it's useless at short range because it's horrible. Good luck trying to focus on something at that close. And here's its performance at long range. A lot of snapping. It's that I see, you really see the targets as if they're like only 50 studs away from you. With this thing, don't worry about hitting the head. As long as it's on the torso, that's already good enough. Lots of snapping though, so yeah. So you're going to really only gonna have to use this on Nuristan or some claustrophobic, but I doubt you're gonna be able to use it for much longer. I think they're going to add more trucks claustrophobic before. And now I'm going to showcase my final thoughts. So yeah, just stay here for that. Alright, just like our previous video, I'm going to be telling you what kind of people should be using these things and my general tips on how to use the SCAR H in general. Starting with our GPR build, I'd say that people who should use it are the kind of people who are new to 308s. These generally have the lowest recoil and they're pretty enjoyable to use because although they're pretty heavy, their ergo will feel the same as a medium ergo M4, and that's what people are usually acclimated to, I'll say. They're also very good for general purpose if you're transitioning from an M4 to a 308, as I've said before. This is a very good place to start because the playstyle is pretty similar to an M4, except here it's more on trying to get your shots on the torso rather than having suppression, because here it's a one shot with a good build. For SPR builds, I'd recommend those for people who are more experienced with this kind of 308 gun, however aren't ready for certain things yet. They're pretty good at taking shots from longer ranges but are not able to stretch out to sniper ranges just yet. Here, the playstyle is still pretty similar to that of a GPR or a 5.56 mid-range rifle or an MRR. However, you're going to have to start to get accustomed to the weight because 308s are battle rifles and they're pretty heavy. I've said this about the GPR, however, you will start to feel the weight if you start with an SPR in 308, like the SCAR H. Then for our DMR builds, I would really recommend those for people who have fully acclimated themselves to the GPRs for the SCAR H, because these things have the highest potential out of any of these four. I've been able to get multiple above 40 kill games with little bets, below 10 actually, and it's pretty enjoyable once you learn how to make up for your weight. You'll learn how to walk, you'll learn how to use the environment to your advantage more, and above all, you're going to learn how to use the shift function, because what I've noticed is that people who use 5.56 do not know how to use shift function effectively or holding breath. For longer ranges and even at shorter ranges, it is important that you know how to use the shift function because let's be honest, not everyone is a crack shot and no one has aimbot in life. And finally, our SASS, the semi-auto sniper systems. These are really for people who are extremely patient. You thought the 5.56 SPR people were patient? No, this is a guy who is going to sit in one place or move around just waiting for that one perfect shot. You'll never get the highest kill in your team unless your team is exceptionally rock-brained with parts of it caved in. However, it's always going to be that huge hit of dopamine. It's like Tarkov. I don't know how Tarkov plays out. However, I've heard that getting that one perfect shot is what people live for, and that's what SASS players live for usually. I'd only recommend SASS builds once you have tried a bolt action, because the playstyle is extremely similar to that. Taking follow-up shots is not recommended. It's just one shot and one shot only. If you don't take that shot, I'm sorry, but you've lost your opportunity. Anyways, for some general tips, with the Scar H compared to other 308s, you're going to be more mobile but you're gonna have higher recoil, which is why try to stay at least, I'd say, 30 studs away from the enemy, because regardless of your build, it's still going to clip into the wall and your soldier is going to have to put it down. So keep your distance, basically. Number 2, use the one-shot capability to your advantage. Regardless of what your build is, if you build it properly, you're going to be able to one-shot up to a certain range. Try to stay within that certain range and don't overextend into ranges where you know you're not going to get that one-shot capability. Plus, aim for the torso. The torso is the largest target, and that's why you have that one-shot capability, so you don't need to aim for the head. Or you could take a penetrating ammo like M80 and you could try to hit a leg into arm shot or something like that if you're in a bit of a pinch. However, that requires a bit of training with firearms in general. And finally, the most important tip in my opinion with the Scar H is to be patient. You'll find that if you start playing with a 5.5, like with a 5.56, where you rush in and you decide to take every fight, you're going to die pretty quickly, because in general, even with high ergo builds, SP 308s, especially the Scar H, do not match to 5.56 like the AUG and the Scar L. So it's better to keep your distance, as I said, and pick your fights. That's the most important part of being patient. If you see multiple enemies, unless you know you can take them, don't take them. Because often what happens is that you're going to try and shoot them, you're going to shoot one, but then some guy is going to dome you from the head in a different direction. Don't ask how that happens, it just happens. In Yuka's words, just the right mount. Well, anyways, that was all the tips, and once again, this is an extremely long video, so thank you for sticking to the end. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good one.